let's think about the Titanic, sinking of the Titanic and relate it to the First World War. You're on the right track here. The Titanic is the epitome of Western technology in 1912. It's the largest ship constructed at the time. It can sail across the ocean in 4.5 days. It can take 2,000 passengers in utmost luxury. It is unsinkable. Nothing can happen to the Titanic. It has the latest and the best technology, latest and the best science that Western society has produced. And it goes out and it sails on the ocean. They sail too quickly through that ice floe. They hit the iceberg, and what happens to it? It sinks. It sinks. Now think about Western Europe in 1914. Western Europe, the nations of Western Europe are at peace. The British and the French and the Germans and the Austrians and the Russians, they're all in peace. There's prosperity. People are living well. The British and the French empires probably control half of the land area of the earth. If you wanted to study history, if you wanted to study physics or chemistry or science, you would go to Berlin. London is the financial capital of the world. So, you know, Western Europe as a society is prosperous, it's at peace, it's sailing along with not a care in the world. But then what happens? The Archduke is assassinated. And Russia begins to mobilize. Austria declares war on Serbia. Next thing you know, the alliance system kicks in, and Europe is at war. War that will last 4 years and will tear itself apart. So the Titanic is really a metaphor for what's going to happen in Western Europe in 1914. The Europeans in 1914, the summer of 1914, did not know they were on the brink of a great war. The French in 1914 in July didn't know that by the end of August 300,000 young French men would be dead. They didn't know that. But the alliance system and the militarism, it was there beneath the surface. And it only needed a spark to kick it off. That spark will come on June 28, 1914. As Otto von Bismarck said, if anything happens in Europe, some damn foolish thing in the Balkans. And he was right. And whatever persuaded the Archduke to go visit Sarajevo, I don't know. He was actually warned by the ambassador from Serbia not to come. And the Archduke said, oh, don't worry about it. They love me down there. Well, they didn't really love him down there. Okay, so this brings us to our subject tonight. We're very privileged to have Dr. Ralph Ostrich with us tonight. Dr. Ostrich is, I must say, he's a World War II veteran. He served in the Pacific. He worked for the United States government for many years. He was in Vietnam. He taught at Northern Virginia Community College for many years. And he's a scholar, and he's knowledgeable about World War I and the period leading up to World War I. And I've asked him to come in and talk about Austria and Russia and the relationship between those two powers, because it's absolutely poisonous. Why is it poisonous? Well, that's what Dr. Ostrich is going to tell us about. All right, have I sufficiently introduced you, Ralph? Go ahead. Your book is right behind you. Do you want it?
With a slight change, I'm going to still talk about Austria-Hungary, because I think Dr. Bukowski will talk a lot about that. I want to talk about the fateful alliance that could never happen. We predict a lot of things that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump will never get together and get rid of their husbands or wives. We think that. we could bet practically every cent you have, but maybe they might. Maybe they might. There's one thing that is hard to predict, and that is historical events that we believe, okay?
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay. Now, what I mean to get to is this. You could not have made a wager that Russia and France would ever get together in an alliance. Revolutionary France, from the French Revolution of 1789, established for the next 100+ years that it was the revolutionary capital of the world. It was what we would call today the extreme radical left. Russia was just on the opposite. They were the extreme conservative, reactionary, undemocratic nation of the world. They persecuted Armenians. They persecuted the Jews. They persecuted the Protestant Christians. They persecuted all of those that were not of the Orthodox faith from time to time. Now, how in the world would these two ever get together? Not only would they get together, they will lay the foundation that you will learn very shortly for World War I, the alliance system. And it will bring their satellites, their being that Austria-Hungary will bring Germany into the war, and the Balkans, particularly Serbia, will bring Russia into the war, or into World War I. And as Dr. Butowski has said, that July was just a month of joy. People were going on vacation and all of that. And in the United States, the headlines were very simple. A guy by the name of Babe Ruth became a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. What big news could you believe? This guy's going to go places. Well, that's what the world was like. However, of mice and men, things do get screwed up, as Bobby Burns said. And why and how could this have happened? How could anybody have made a prediction of what would happen? And this is a problem that people have tried over the years to predict. They use all sorts of things that would predict. And half of the time they'd be right, and half of the time they would be wrong. Who would have predicted this? It's a little story that goes along with this. Two youngsters, roughly about the age of 10, were playing in the playground of the school. They were probably in the 4th or 5th grade. And they had a great fun playing whatever kids do when you're 10 years old, 9 years of age. And they became so friendly that one of the youngsters decided to bring his new friend back home and have him for dinner. So he brought his friend back to introduce to his mom. He said, "Mom, I want you to meet my new friend. He's a nice guy." And mother said, "Oh yes, he sounds very bright," and so on. And does he know that we're a Jewish family? And the host youngster said, "Oh, it doesn't matter because we're such good friends. Religion's not an important factor." Well, these two youngsters, after the 4th grade or 5th grade, separated. One went to one school, one went to the other. And we always wondered what happened to these two kids, these two youngsters, who went to dinner, had fun, and loved it. They were playmates. One said to his mother, "Mom, my new friend and I were born practically on the same day, in 1889. Oh, Mom said, "Oh, wonderful, isn't that nice?" And all of that stuff, and brought out some cake, cookies. Many years later, and we pressed the button, forward, and we wondered whatever happened to those two youngsters. How did they end up? Well, one of the youngsters' name was Ludwig Wittgenstein. Many of you probably never heard of Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was one of, and still is, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century. And we needn't go into 20th century philosophy of positivism and all that stuff. Now, anybody can make a guess who the other youngster, his dear good friend, was? His name was Adolf Hitler. How's that for a surprise? And that's what happened to these folks. Heard about it now. Now, what does that tell us? Don't bet on a sure thing. Bet on the odd. And once in a while, you'll win. Now, what made the Fateful Alliance, and this is the title of a book, that a great historian, political scientist, an American spokesman in the United Nations and in political circles, the Fateful Alliance. How could it come about? What could the unexpected be about? Well, if you haven't gotten to this point, you will. That the Bismarck, who became chancellor in 1860, came up with a theory. And his theory was that Germany must never, ever fight a two-front war. If I had the writing material, I would have made a diagram. But in your mind, Lord, but they don't know how to fight a war. And way over here, on the right corner, is the Ottoman Empire. And above the Ottoman Empire is a big circle, huge oval, and that is the Black Sea. Now, I'm not here to give you a geography lesson, so my instincts tells me, as most Americans, including myself, know very little about geography and where things are. So once in a while, open up your textbook and look at the map. Because to go from the Mediterranean Sea to the Black Sea, you have to go through one of the great freaks of nature, and that is a 100-mile waterway, and that is the Straits, and referred to as the Straits, and you will hear all through the period prior to World War I, much of the diplomacy was tied to the question of the Straits.
The Dardanelles.
Straits.
The Dardanelles.
I'm sorry.
The Dardanelles. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and you're running ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to catch up with you. The Straits on one side, as you enter into this narrow waterway, and on the other end, going out into the Black Sea, is the Bosphorus. It's a Greek word, Bosphorus, means the entry gateway into the Black Sea. Now, this was part of a greater question known as the Eastern Question, which baffled Europe from the time that Catherine the Great in 1774 defeated the Turks and annexed all of the territories which we know as the Ukraine on the north shore of the Black Sea. And so this was a great prize for the Russians. That's why Catherine's called the Great. Many other reasons why, but we won't get into that. But nevertheless, for Russia, moving to the Black Sea brought her great riches because this became the granary, or the area where the grain was raised, which fed Europe. So Russia's economic wealth was dependent on, at least before the Industrial Revolution really took hold, on the sale of grain. So Russian ships had to pass through. Now, in a victorious moment, the Russians said, in a sense, when the treaty was signed, and that treaty that was signed with Unkiar Skelezi, one of those strange odd names, that Turkish name Unkiar Skelezi, of 1774, which only Russian ships could go through the straits, and that is the sort of the force that was put on the Turks. Now, what is the problem here? Very simple. Very simple. The problem was that the British made it a matter of absolute necessity, strategic necessity, that British ships, and all foreign ships, specifically warships, can go through the straits and into the Black Sea. Now, all of this might have worked well, except for one reason. The Russians wanted only their ships to go through, and not the British, because they knew that if the British ships, warships got in, that would make southern Russia vulnerable to the British Navy. It's strategic. Whether this was true or not is what the British thought. And when you have the best Navy in the world at that time, you can say all you want. Now, having said that, the British, by all means, said they should be able to enter into the Black Sea because that would hold the Russians in a peaceable way, to be that the British, that they would always have this strength to offset whatever the Russians wanted to do, and that includes as an ally of Austria-Hungary and all sorts of things. So we won't get into all of that. But what is of historical importance is this. What the British were willing to do is to shut the straits down. And so they backed Turkey to the hilt to block the Russian fleet from going into the Mediterranean. So it became a battle of who can control the straits, who can go in and who can go out. Can the British be kept out of the Black Sea, and can and that's the Russian hope, and the British hope was that they can go into the Black Sea but keep the Russians out of the Mediterranean. That was the Eastern question. Why would the British want the Russians out of the Mediterranean? As far as the British were concerned, they didn't own the Mediterranean, but the Royal Navy did. Now think of the strategic importance. What was between Gibraltar and the Dardanelles that you mentioned? Why shut down the Mediterranean to the Russian fleet? Can you think of what great waterway is between the Straits and the other entrance to the Mediterranean?
Suez Canal.
What?
Suez Canal.
You got it. Suez Canal. Suez Canal. Why were the British so anxious to keep the Russians out of the Mediterranean and be a threat? And if they got into the Mediterranean, from the British strategic thinking, it could block and cut off the Suez Canal. Anybody have a guess? What? Now here we're talking 1774. Now, anybody know what happened in 1763?
63.
I can't hear you.
Treaty or something.
I'm not sure what happened in 63, but at least when the Suez Canal was created, that was their lifeline to their colony of India.
Ah, you got it. Yeah. India, the part of the empire, which in 1763 is when it's a great year for American history buffs. 1763 at the Treaty of Paris. In 1763, King George III found out from his Prime Minister, Lord Grenville, that, sire, we have a great news for you. We have won an empire. We have won Canada. We beat the French in Canada, and we beat the French in India. I got bad news for you. This is sort of a little subheading here. I got some bad news for you, Your Majesty, not good news. And the king would ask, well, what's the bad news? Well, sir, and again, expect the unexpected. Our treasury is practically bankrupt. We've been fighting two great wars, the War of the Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War. Now that's a lot of European history if you know what I'm talking about. And now, having said that, Grenville had the best answer. The king said, well, what are we going to do about this bankrupt treasury of ours? Well, sir, I got a great idea. Can I come back in a couple of days? Okay, come back with your answer. A couple of days later, well, my Lord Prime Minister, what great news have you got to solve the problem of our bankrupt treasury? Anybody know? Where are we going to get the money?
The colonies.
From the colonies.
We're going to do what?
From the colonies.
Ah, from the colony. Yeah, we're going to tax the colonies. Hey, wasn't that a great solution? If it was a great solution, the British wouldn't have lost the American Empire. You're right. Okay, so we're not going into American history. That's another lecture. However, all of this is to give you a frame of reference that what seems to be true is not necessarily true. What might happen could happen. And in the fateful alliance of Russia and France, it happened. How did it happen? It happened very simple. Unfortunately for Germany, the old Kaiser that put Bismarck, the old Kaiser William I, and the word Kaiser, by the way, means Tsar. In German, Kaiser, it means Tsar. And the word Tsar, Kaiser, comes from, of course, the word Caesar. If you didn't know that, now you know. Kaiser means Caesar. German and Tsar means Caesar in Russian. Now, to understand this, Bismarck's theory is, as I said earlier, that Germany is in a vulnerable position. Enemies, potential enemies to the right and left. And as luck would have it, or as Bismarck laid it out, he fought a series of several wars, which we won't go into here. However, he defeated the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and told the Austrians, stay out of Germany, Prussia and Germany. Stay down there in Vienna, in Hungary, and leave us alone. Bismarck's first unification. His second unification was very simple. The French, their emperor, Napoleon III, was not one of the brightest guys around. In fact, if I were to list the 10 most stupid emperors that existed, and a bunch of them, and I include a couple presidents also, and a lot of folks should go in there. But Napoleon III thought with the name of Napoleon, he could emulate his grand uncle, Napoleon I. He called himself Napoleon. Actually, he was elected president, and then he decided 2 years later he would call himself emperor and put a crown on his head. And after that, and he became Napoleon III. France had, Napoleon III had grand and glorious expectancies for France, far beyond her capability. The reason is very simple. France had just been on the winning side of a war with Russia several years earlier, known as the Crimean War. Happily on fire to the right and fire to the left, volley shot. You know, all that, Rudyard Kipling's great poem. See, so you get a little poetry in this. Now, having said that, Napoleon III said, these Prussians, at that time they were called Prussians, who do they think they are? I am Napoleon III. What they didn't know is that Bismarck had some very, very smart military people around him. Von Rundel, the chief of staff of the Prussian army, and von Rundel put together with his other folks a whole plan on how they could defeat the French. Bismarck, being rather smart about things and very perceptive, knew for Germany to become #1 in Europe, two things must happen. One is to defeat France. Two, to keep Britain out of a war with Germany. Under no circumstances must Germany go to war with Great Britain. Now, that seemed to work quite well. In the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, the Germans, or the Prussians at that time, defeated the French holistically. I mean, just wiped them off practically. Not only did they do that, they did something which somebody told them, one of the politicians, German, Your Majesty, do not, or the military, do not take French territory away. You won the war, you beat them, like you beat a couple of years earlier the Austro-Hungarians, and you let them off the hook and said, okay, go away. We beat the French. Let them go and have their whatever they do in France. They do a lot of things. But do not give them any ideas or cause for revenge, or as the British say, revanche. Revanche. Because you take that territories away from them, and what territories are we talking about? Did the Germans take from the French back there?
Alsace-Lorraine.
Alsace-Lorraine. Hey, you gotta sit next to these guys and you understand. Nope. Alsace-Lorraine. Why? That's where the coal and steel. That was the heart of the French Industrial Revolution. not only that, it would give the Germans great strategic advantage because they would be on the left bank of the Rhine River. And so they would always be down the throat of the French in case of a war. The Rhine would no longer serve as a barrier to the Germans. Very smart thinking on the part of the Germans. Now, for the next couple of years, Bismarck set up a series of alliances. The guy was unbelievable. And he got all of the great powers of Europe as allies or checkmated. So he had the Italians, the Austrians, and the Russians, and of course the Germans, in Bismarck's alliance system. Now, was this a happy group? No, sir, it was not. But Bismarck was able, because of the power of Germany having defeated Austria and having defeated France, was now building the best and strongest army of Europe. Was Germany a naval power? No, they didn't need it. They had the manpower and what it takes to win a war on land. So the Germans didn't worry about a navy at that time. In fact, they had none. However, the alliance system of Bismarck had to face a reality. And that reality was Russia and Austria were bitter by now